West Transportation Planning Organization Fiscal Year 27 Call for Projects Training. So we are kicking off our call for projects with a bang. I'm Kelly McGee. I'm the planning manager here at Triangle West. Thank you all. Those of you who are here in the room, thanks for being present with us, and we appreciate those of you who are attending online. This will be our last call for projects with this current federal funding policy. So most of you are aware, I think, that we have a big grant from USDOT to update our prioritization process, which we hope to be kicking off early in the new year. We'll be making some updates to the federal funding policy in accordance with that grant. But for the purposes of today, our current federal funding policy is still in place, and Philmon will be talking more about that here in a moment. We have a couple of presenters with us as well, so we'll let them introduce themselves here. And with that, I will turn it over to Philmon.
Thank you, Colleen. So I'm Philmon Kasatzian, I'm planning here at Triangle West, and I'll be going over our federal funding policy and how it applies to this current call for projects and the application process.
And then we're going to go down.
Good morning. I'm Sheila Atwood. I am with the Local Programs Management Office, and I will be presenting on local projects in the EBS system and talk about some funding and your agreements and schedule and just a short, brief overview of the local project delivery.
I'm Raymond Hayes. I'm the local projects manager for NCDOT Division 5.
Thank you. Go ahead, Philmon.
All right, so just start off with kind of showing you what's coming up. So first we'll go over the schedule, both for this call for projects, as well as the process of programming these funds into the STIP. Then we'll go over the eligibility requirements as outlined by federal funding policy, and then the actual steps we need to take to submit the applications for these projects. Following that, we'll go over the different funding sources that are available and how we will be scoring the projects for this call. So getting into the schedule, so first is the schedule just for this call for projects. And so beginning in January with our applications, and staff will score the projects in the next couple following months. April is when this list of recommended projects will be going out for public comment period, and they'll be coming back in June for approval. And once our board approves it, that is the end of our call for projects, and it kind of goes into some separate process. Process actually programming these funds into the STIP. So once in the same month that our board will be approving it, we'll also be releasing our TFP amendment number 4 for our public comment, and that amendment will have the recommended projects from this call. So that will take about 2 months in DOT to process, and then it'll come back in October for the NC Board of Transportation to approve their admin handout and officially include the projects within the STIP. And just noting that the municipal agreements for the projects cannot be set up until project details are in the STIP. And so that's why the schedule is so important now. Getting to the eligibility requirements, these are outlined in our federal funding policy, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. So first, it has to be eligible to receive federal aid for any of our funding sources. The second is has to be locally administered, meaning the applicant is committed to managing the project and is responsible for any funds and also overages. Third is MTP compliance, and now as you guys know, the majority of projects within our call for projects are non-motorized projects, non-motorized and transit projects. These are in a category called operational improvements in the MTP, and so they won't explicitly be named, but if you're not sure if it would be included in that, just reach out to staff and we can help sort that out. Fourth, the project phase that you requested funding for must be one of the following in this list. These are just the main project phases, engineering, right-of-way, construction, as well as utilities, and then other categories such as transit capital projects and our TDM program. And lastly, the applicant must provide a local match of 20% to go with the 80% federal funding. This is across the board with all of our funding sources. Now to the submission process. So we'll be sending out a Microsoft form that has the questions that are outlined in our federal funding policy. There's two different sets, depending on if you're asking for funding for a new project or if you're asking for additional funding for all the existing projects. With that form, the documentation that we'll be asking for, we have two, one for the budget and one for the scheduling. Just for additional details on those, Raymond will be going over those after this presentation. And lastly, just shape files for the project to be emailed to me. If you also need help with creating files, just let us know in advance. We can also help with that as well. This is just a reminder of just the current situation as far as active projects. So we do have a cap based off of our UPWP, and it shows the most active projects that an agency can have going on. And so you'll only be able to submit new projects up to the difference between current and active. While we're talking about the applications, I also want to touch on the funding caps. This is part of our federal funding policy. So an individual project can only request up to 40% of our regional flex funding funds. So that's approximately $12 million. And then for the agency as a whole, for all projects, their total cannot exceed 65% of the RFF funds. And so for this call, that's around 19.5 million. One other thing to mention, part of our federal funding policy is that funding awarded outside of our call for projects does still count towards those agency caps during the call for projects. And so these two tables just list out the instances since our last call for projects where projects have requested additional funds. Normally this would count towards the caps, but there were a couple projects towards bottom that we felt shouldn't apply for the reasons that are listed there. Now getting into the funding availability of how much money we have to program. So here's the full table. The amount from past years and for FY27 are what is left over from our last call for projects. Although we had a large amount of money to program then, following our call projects, we did a series of STIP swaps to swap the DA funds on those projects from RDA funds to funds covered by NCDOT. And so we were able to cover a large chunk of money through that, which is why the amount for past years is so high. And then the amount for FY28 is our standard annual allocation of what we can only expect for future years. Quickly going over the different funding sources. Of course, BGDA is our most flexible funding source, can be applied to any project that's eligible for federal aid. And then Transportation Alternatives is a subset of the block grant program, but it's primarily used for bicycle production facilities. And then we have CMAQ, congestion mitigation, air quality projects. There are two types of funding with CMAQ. So the direct allocation that we received to program ourselves, and then there's statewide. Statewide funds can be used for situations for regional projects of significance, or others based off of the state's plans. It's also used at times to supplement funds that we program ourselves. The thing to note is all funding sources, this and the two I mentioned before, all require a 20% local match.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are there any like future concerns about any of the available funding sources, like that they'll like not be there in the future, or it's just based on the federal landscape and the way it is right now?
I would say nothing's been officially confirmed, but we have been taking actions to be more proactive in spending our money just to prepare for the worst.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Is there a particular funding source you're worried about, Eric?
No, I'm just this is a curiosity question.
One other thing I wanted to call out from our federal funding policy is this clause here, just on the ability to use funds in cases where an agency cannot secure local match after 2 years of receiving RFF, or there are egregious delays to using the money. Staff will ask the board to make a recommendation about whether the funds should be withdrawn from the project and returned to a pool. And this 2-year timeline begins once the appeal board has approved project funding. This is something we've had in our policy, but haven't always enforced, but we will be looking into this a lot more, just as our policies will be evolving in the next year. Getting to the scoring, the last section here. So for new projects, they will be scored in maximum of 115 points for the following criteria. There's connectivity, just totaling the number of connecting points for bicycle and pedestrian facilities to projects. There's the access to transit, just looking at the proximity of fixed route transit stops to the new projects. Population and employment density, where points are awarded just based on just that, the population and employment density within half mile of the requested project. Then project phase, we do want projects to move forward, and so we prioritize projects that are further ahead and phases than new projects. So if it is in construction or right away, then it does get some extra points for that. The local priority can be put onto any points, any project of your choosing from your agency. It's just used to signify your priorities. There is the environmental justice and equity, where we look at the new projects and look at what communities of concern that they'll be overlapping in. And then ending with safety and emissions and BMT reductions. Safety, we use crash data to look at proximity of those data to projects. And then emissions, staff does an emission reduction calculation on all projects. And this criteria is also how we determine which projects we submit for CMAQ funding. With that, happy to take any questions on our call project specifically.
Are there any questions from those online? If so, please feel free to either unmute yourself or type it into the chat. All right.
Feel free to pipe up if it comes to you later on.
Stephanie from Town of Hillsborough asked, do new projects have to be in the CTP?
Yes, just because by extension, projects in the MTP also within the CTP. So by extension.
And Tina has a question as well. How is design funded only after 30%?
I'm not sure I'll follow the question of how to request funds for design, or
I thought I saw, thanks for taking the question. I thought I saw a slide and it was kind of a quick view that suggested that funding was at 30% and up. So is the expectation moving forward that some type of feasibility or very high-level preliminary design would have been completed prior to submittal?
No, that might have been, let's see, I wonder which slide that was. Could it have been the contingency percentage? Okay, beyond 30% plans. Yeah, that is what it says.
So I'll need to look through our policy, just double check the context, but I would assume that that signifies whether it applies as a new project or return for existing funds.
This is specific for new projects? Or was this existing? This list,
Applies to,
all projects,
Right.
okay. We'll follow up on that, Tina.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So I don't have anything specific in mind on this, but I am curious to know as a county, if we were to partner with NCDOT and say, hey, we want to supplement funding for a project to make it safer or have bike ped elements or something like that. How would that count or be considered here? Is it? I mean, it would be a Durham County request, I guess, but is there any
You're-
question though?
Are you thinking it would be like an existing project that we're adding funding to make it, to kind of go above and beyond? Or would it be a county initiated project that's a partnership with DOT?
Like to make a turn lane project a roundabout, for example,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically.
I think that would be a county initiated request through this process. But since we haven't had one like that before, we'll have to think through that question a little bit more.
Yeah, ultimately,
It's a STIP funded project already,
it depends on who's managing
hypothetically.
the project.
Hypothetically, yes.
It would just depend on who's managing, because there have been projects in the past that have started from privatization or locally administered and have gone vice versa. So I guess depends on who agrees to be the champion and manage it.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I see Raymond nodding his head.
Campos does that. That DOT submits a project for a municipality because DOT may have the slot for it, or DOT may say, we want to submit a project, can we use Wake County slot? And Wake County's like, sure, we'll take the project,
Mhm.
and then DOT will run it. Or there's a project in Holly Springs where it's a DOT STIP project, but the county's like, or the municipality said, the schedule's too far out for us, we want to take it over.
In advance.
And it becomes a lap project, and then they keep it on schedule, not delay it.
Okay,
So
see.
there's opportunities like Ellen's asking about, but there needs to be a lot of coordination with who's going to manage it, where's the funding coming from, can that funding be used in combination with other funding and so forth. That takes up, and then DOT needs to figure out where it falls in their prioritization at the division level over where, say, Durham County wants it to be. Do they want it to be in 2 years? And Division 5 says, well, we're not going to get to it for 5 years.
Mhm.
And then you figure out what's going to happen then about managing it and y'all providing supplemental funding or additional funding or something different. So,
A lot of coordination would be needed for
Yes,
this
a lot,
type of project.
correct. But it gets done, Wake County's doing, it happens in Wake County pretty consistently where people are trading projects back and forth of who initiates it under whose priority or slot availability and so forth. And then the only other thing that what Ellen's talking about that becomes problematic is if an entity submits funding for a project, but that funding is for a minor component of a bigger project, that becomes challenging. Like a municipality submitted they have a water line project and they wanted to add just the sidewalk as the federal aid portion. But the problem that creates is the whole project becomes federalized.
Right.
So it makes it challenging if the federal aid portion is a minor component to a significantly bigger project, because the requirements for that bigger project just stepped up to federal aid requirements of to meet the project funding goal. So it's not recommended for the federal aid to be a minor component. It's for that federal aid portion to be the major component of a project. And a municipality can do a small add-on at their expense for, like, say, a water line improvement instead of doing it the opposite way.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind because that makes it really challenging.
Thank you for the question, Ellen.
Thanks.
If y'all are planning to proceed with that, let's continue to discuss, because it sounds like we'll need to do quite a bit of coordination ahead of the application. Okay, we have a few more questions in the chat. Can you send out the slides? Yes, we will. Curtis is asking, are transit maintenance facilities eligible projects?
Since they're capital projects, yes.
Yes, they would be eligible through the call.
How would they be scored though? The way the scoring worked seemed, I don't know, not targeted towards that. I'm just curious.
You want to talk about that, Philman?
I mean, you are correct that the current scoring system does not equally score all different types of projects equally, such as construction projects versus other transit projects. That's an issue we've identified to address in our upcoming study to restructure our federal funding policy, but for the time being, we're working with what we've got.
Understood. Thank you.
We'll look at it on a case-by-case basis for this current call for projects. Similar to last call, we received a few transit or bus purchase projects. And those are projects that are able to advance very quickly. And we like those for that reason, because we can deliver on the projects and get the funding obligated quickly, but they don't always score as well with our current system. So more to come on that. And yes, Eric, we can send out the federal funding policy. I can probably put a link to it in the chat.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions before we move on? Hearing none. I think Raymond is up next. You want to advance the slides?
We'll move a slide, just the template to
Okay.
The Excel sheet?
Yeah.
Which one?
one at a time. Budget or schedule first.
It don't matter.
Okay.
Zoom in to the column BC, A, B, C, D area. There you go. So you can zoom out just a bit so I can get. How's that for now? All right, so one thing I've identified over the time I've been doing lab projects oversight for division is that and many of the municipal or MPO participants are having challenges coming up with how to budget for the project. And I noticed initially that a lot of budgets were based on just construction costs. And that is one part of a budget, but the participants need to be looking more at the total project budget, not just construction costs. Because the thing that the participants need to understand is that all project eligible costs are eligible for reimbursement if they're program appropriate. So like if you need to hire a CEI, that's a project cost. If you need to hire an engineering firm to do your project management during design, that's an eligible cost. You just need to account for that. So I created a simple budget form. Well, in my head, it's simple. It's to kind of help a municipality identify components that need to be considered when putting together their total project budget. And part of what this form does is it accounts for, obviously, if you start at the top in the areas that are highlighted green, where that's locations where data is to be input. Starting at the top, you'll put in the federal match. Moving down, I put in an escalation calculation based on the time when the funding is received to the point in time when construction is anticipated to start. So that is something that the applicant will need to consider when they're looking at the project. If you're doing a small sidewalk project, for example, that might be it could be a 1 year time frame. But if you're doing, say, some of other projects that I've seen, it could be 3 to 4 years. And so this adds a simple escalation calculation for that idea. The other big expense outside of the biggest expenses you have are construction, potentially right-of-way, and CEI costs, contract inspection during construction. So the other thing I added in was to put in the number of inspectors you anticipate being on the project, and also the duration of the construction itself. And then as you move down, you can see DOT system charges are per your agreement would be at 10% estimation. And then the contingencies are contingencies that Triangle West would impose upon the project, depending on what phases you're asking for reimbursement. So in this example, you can see it's a $1 million construction cost that's assumed to be 2 years from the time funding is awarded till the time construction starts. It's a 12-month duration with 1 inspector needed on the project. So moving down, PE cost is calculated at a straight 15%. If you know that number, if you're not getting reimbursed for PE, then you can just put $0 into the federal amount for PE, and you may already know your PE costs from the firm that you're using currently. And then moving down, you can see it calculates contingency, right-of-way costs, and utilities. That's something you would want to investigate reasonably well prior to the project. Just doing an appraisal on a parcel is going to be about $3,500 per parcel. So if you got 10 parcels on your project, you can assume appraisal fees are going to run at least $35,000. That doesn't take into account any acquisition amounts for easements, permanent and or temporary and or right-of-way acquisition. That's something your utility department should be able to, or right-of-way department should be able to give you some good assumed costs in the market you're in, and check those. And then moving down, you can see construction. In this example, it's 2 years differential between funding award to construction start. So it does a 5% per calendar year multiplier. It's just a straight cost. That's why it adds $100,000 to construction estimate, because it's converting the construction estimate to future year dollars. But you're asking for your dollars now, and we'll be receiving them now. And then CEI calculates at around $25,000 per inspector per month. And the reason that's so high is because for CEI, in Division 5, when you hire CEI, you're hiring the inspector, a document manager, the materials and testing firm, the project engineer, potentially a project manager. Now, one person could do several of those roles, or you could have an individual for each of those positions. And so that total package of people added up equates to about $25,000 a month, $20,000 to $25,000 a month as a general estimate. So just keep that in mind as you look at this. You could scroll down, please. And then just going on down, you can see the numbers towards the bottom half are broken into PE section, right-of-way utility, and then construction section. This sheet calculates DOT charges. Those are based on the amount of federal dollars requested. So, but most people want to calculate 10% of total cost, which is fine. It's just going to be a little bit more money than actual, but that's fine because issues come up during the project that you might need extra money. And so going through the calculations with the contingencies applied up top, the way Triangle West wants to utilize them right now, you're looking at about a $2.5 million project budget that should be anticipated by the local government for $1 million construction project that's going to start work approximately 2 years from now. The way this sheet is set up and the way the calculations are done, theoretically, you should end the project with some federal funding left over, but hopefully not a lot. But if something happens during the project, say your 12-month construction turns into 15 months and you need more time for your CEI, that's where the contingency comes in and the extra budget amounts for items that are in that calculation. There's normally not a contingency necessary for PE. That's usually pretty fixed. Right away is a huge unknown. So the contingency in the right of way is probably going to get utilized, and the contingency during construction, from what I've seen, rarely gets utilized because most projects usually finish on time. And of the 8 years I've done this, I think 3 projects have actually overrun their contract price total in 8 years out of a few hundred projects. So they usually come in on budget.
Can I interrupt you for a
Sure.
second? I see the NCDOT charges aren't baked into that grand total. Is that because it's not
They are.
reimbursable?
They are big.
Oh.
They are.
I just did the math and it doesn't add up. Like the estimated project total doesn't include the NCDOT charges on there.
They are because they're in the PE. If you add up PE expense, utility, right-of-way utility, and construction, the charges are added up into those 3 numbers
Oh, the NCDOT charges are integrated throughout those.
in the
three?
calculation.
Okay.
So from line 28 up, those are all individual numbers.
Yeah.
From line 30, 31, and 32, the DOT charges are in that calculation automatically.
Okay.
So if you are going to use this sheet and you're like, well, we're not going to get PE, we're not going to ask for PE reimbursement, and that's fine. All you would want to do is go into column C in the PE section and just put $0 in the federal amounts. That still doesn't change the fact that you're paying for the PE charges yourself, which is still part of the budget you need to account for. So this sheet can be used to show you total project budget and the amount of funding you're going to be asking for. If you're working on a project that's already got PE and right-of-way funded and all you're asking for is construction, you can just eliminate everything in the federal column for right-of-way and utility and engineering and just leave the construction values in to see what you're asking for. So the sheet is easily editable so that you can adjust it to whatever time or financial situation your project is currently in. You could also use this to ask for supplemental funding if you wanted to do that or calculate that out. So there's a lot of flexibility in the sheet here that is available depending on how you intend to use it and for what purpose you're using it for, either new project budget or existing project with a supplemental funding request for a budget increase. Any questions? This is, I would say, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Philman, my contact information will be you can get from Philman, and I can walk through it with you based on your specific project and situation. I've been using this sheet and another tab on the sheet that's currently not shown for supplemental funding requests. I've been using it for close to 3 years now with Campo and Campo projects and municipalities that are asking for supplemental funding, and it's been working extremely well for that, for what it's being for supplemental funding asks. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I can walk through it. Every project is unique, so it's not. And I say this about this form. If you put all your numbers in here, this does not give you the answer. It just gives you an answer to start a discussion with, because I don't know how you want to fund your project. I don't know what parts you want to ask for reimbursement for. I have no idea how you want to manage the finances of your project. So I can't build a sheet to answer all those what ifs. I had built this just to say, this is the total amount of money you should think about planning for in your budget, and then you can decide which parts you want to get reimbursed for or pay for yourself or so forth. Once again, I don't know that. That's for that municipality to decide how they want to financially manage their projects or project. Good?
I'm good, thank you.
Anything else, Phil, you feel like I need to address in this?
Not with this. Just a heads up with everyone, just like there are 2 Microsoft forms, there will be 2 versions of the budget sheet available. One on if you're requesting funds for a new project, and the second on if you're requesting supplemental funds, just due to the different contingencies required.
Right, and the next document we're going to speak about is going to be what I once again believe is a simple schedule document. That schedule form and this document should be utilized together, because if you look at your project schedule and you realize, oh, well, we plan to do this in 2 years, but our schedule shows it's really going to take 3, then you need to make sure you come back and adjust the budget form to account for 3 years between funding award to construction start, 2 years.
It's breathing. Listening to the RFF funding training.
All right.
The county is.
That one you heard. All right.
I think we can move on to the scheduling.
Go to the PE right-of-way construction tab. And zoom, please, sir. All right, zoom in a little more. Okay, I just wanted to make sure the numbers could appear. Okay, so this is there were some challenges that I have noticed with some municipalities believing that they could proceed some projects through one federal fiscal year, starting with design and getting all the way to construction funding authorization. And while that is possible for very limited scope projects, that it can be done and has been done, it's not the case most of the time, depending on some of the projects that are trying to get pushed through the LAP program now. So I developed this is a Gantt style scheduling document. I built it in Excel. It's a very simplistic schedule. There's some very simple logic in it regarding some concurrent work tasks. I could have built it in Project and made it real super fancy and slick, and it would have been what it is and probably would have been very cumbersome to use for some. So this is done in Excel, and the section of the screen on the left is the actual Excel table. The section of the screen on the right is a horizontal bar chart that mimics the style of a Gantt chart so that it shows tasks with durations identified based on the date on the left. And so the point of this is for when the LGA puts together their project schedule, if you look at the items in yellow, the 4 items in view here, these are the things that the municipality can control. How long the design firm takes to get their design turned around between the 30, 60, 90%, 30, 60, 100% plans and the CE document. The items you see that are not highlighted are items that the LGAs don't control. And those are pretty well determined time frame durations. Sheila and I talked about this a while back, and we looked at these durations, and they all seem pretty reasonable based on current progress of active projects. And so what this wanted to do was just make sure that those time frames that are not within the control of the municipality are calculated, because if you look there when the funding request happens, those are 60-day durations if we're lucky to get them within 2 months. And you can see the other ones are pretty quick to get turned around. The other one that's really a really significant number is the municipal agreement for 120 days. That, if you think about it, that has to go through municipal approval and then go to DOT board for approval. And DOT board is automatic 60 days because it goes draft and then final approval. So it's never going to happen in less than 90 to get on a municipal board. So the point of this was so that if you see the date in blue, light blue there, October 1st, 2026. In this case here, this sheet is set up for fiscal year 27, which means that funds, is that right? 27, which means funds being requested are eligible starting October 1st of calendar year 2026. Now, if in this example here, if you notice there's three other tabs at the bottom for PE construction funding, right-of-way construction, and construction only based on what types of phases you're being requesting for reimbursement. This example assumes all 3 phases. So in this example here, your PE funding would be eligible presumptively on October 1st on the assumption the federal site is back open on October 1st, which hasn't happened in the 8 years I've done it, but there's a good chance this year it might happen, but I'm not hopeful. So on that assumption there, presumptively, if the call for projects is now and they make a decision, let's say by the end of January, assumption wise, and they get everything approved and all the projects are known by, say, the end of February, then theoretically you would want to start your EBS application in May to get everything in place so that come October 1st, 2026, you're able to go in and say, I'm ready to ask for funding. And then you wait 2 months for it to show up, unfortunately. So, and then And then as you move through the project, you can see here, you would put in assumptions of duration for 25, 65% plans, right-of-way acquisition time, and then the amount of time for completion of the plans to final status, along with the specs and estimate also. So there is a little bit of simple logic in there where when you're doing right-of-way acquisition, you can be working on 100% plans. And so there is some overlap there if you pay attention to the bar chart off the screen there to the right. If you can scroll down some, please. And then you can see basically on this schedule was based on a very, very simple sidewalk project. And these durations in yellow are pretty optimistic. And you can still see that even when funding is asked for, requested on October 1st, that project still isn't even, they're still only requesting for construction funding basically 13 months later. So it's a very optimistic plan that a lot of municipalities had in the past. Go to the construction tab, please. The far right.
There's a question in the chat of what about regulatory or permitting review?
So because this is a locally administered project managed by the municipality, they are responsible for submitting their project to any applicable agency necessary for environmental or Army Corps of Engineer permitting or so forth. That'll be done through their normal design process.
So they probably need to add time for those reviews into this schedule too.
If you look at my chart here, my schedule is very linear. So there's not a lot of concurrent activities. I could add a line in there for environmental permitting, but they have the eligibility, they have the opportunity to get environmental permitting from the time they start the project till the time they expect plans to be completed. It can happen anytime within there. So I don't really, I can
Somewhere
put
in that window.
I can put it in there, but what I would do is I would push it all the way to the bitter end, and it would just be hanging out there with a massive amount of float on it.
Okay.
So it's something that needs to be accounted for, but it's not shown here because my theory in building this was basically I just went critical path method on when I did this. So everything here is theoretically critical path item, except for a couple things that could or couldn't, they could swap in and off the critical path. So in this example here for construction, if you're going to be requesting federal fiscal year 27 construction funding, technically to meet the requirement, you would have to request that funding no later than September 30th of 2027. So you have that entire federal fiscal year to request the funding to technically meet funding requests within the fiscal year. So in this example here, the construction funding was set at the start of the fiscal year, but realistically, you have up until roughly about the first week. When's the site normally shut down? About the second week of September. You've got about to the first week of September to request funding within that fiscal year. The federal funding request site normally shuts down mid-September for federal fiscal year transition. So no requests can be submitted usually after the second week of September.
And when you're talking about requests, you're not talking about requests through us. We're talking about a separate request process.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is for federal funding for the construction phase to move into construction.
This assumes you've already gotten funding through our call for
That's
projects.
correct. And so theoretically, if you're looking at the construction tab here, if you feel like you can move quickly through a project, you may want to have construction funding at the start of, in the fall of the calendar year. Get your bids out, get everything ready through the winter so that you can go to construction in the spring of 2027. But if you don't think you're gonna make it starting now to get into federal fiscal year 27, you may want to move construction requests till the end of federal fiscal year 27 and plan to start work in the spring of 2020, whatever, that following spring. My brain's getting
28.
28. So on this example here, I built this project example on a larger road improvement project. And can you edit the sheet right quick while you're in it?
Yeah.
Change that 9/126 to 9, or 10, change the 10/126 to 9/127,
In the blue.
the blue date.
Sorry, I don't have very precise control over this.
That's 9/127. And you'll see the sheet update in this example too. Hit enter.
It's 91/12/27.
Yes, it's not going to understand that date for sure. So in this example now, assuming you're going to request construction in September of 2027, and that the design phase is going to take approximately a year, right-of-way acquisition is going to take about a year if it's a larger project. Theoretically, and in this example, PE and right-of-way are being paid for by the municipality. You're only requesting construction funding. So if you were going to initiate or request construction funding from Triangle West for this project, and you're assuming you're going to authorize that funding or submit that funding request in September, you should theoretically start this project in July of 2025. And so it back calculates from the blue date back to the initial start of the project with the PE RFLOI. Now, once again, if you feel some of those durations in yellow are a little bit much based on your project scope, then you can adjust them to see when you should start. But if you're going to come to Triangle West and say, we want to request this project, but we haven't started design yet, then their response to you is, well, you're already 4 months behind schedule. So that might be something you might want to consider. Are you really going to meet that duration of project or that schedule for that design duration based on whether you have or haven't started a project? So that's just ways to use this schedule document for that purpose. All right. And
There's a suggestion in the chat about adding in permitting at 60% or 90% design documents as a reminder to people using this
Sure.
template. Or include that
Like I
as a
said,
note.
the intent of what this schedule is to be used for is at some point right now where you like, we think we want to go build a project. Let's see how long that process is going to take. This schedule could be manipulated into something during design that you can utilize. I have another form that actually tracks actuals where you can put actuals in and it'll compare original schedule to actual schedule. I have another version of this that I developed. So this is at some point in time right now if you're going to request funding, so that you can just get a relative,
Requested in the
Good
proper
idea.
year. Yeah.
at least make sure you're in the correct year, calendar year, or see what year you end up in. Because I think Triangle West, y'all
We have a multiple year.
fund out multiple years and they think, well, we want this one in 28, but realistically, this one might fall in 29. And so that may change what projects they want to request or which projects they present for laying out projects. Plus, it helps the municipality understand how they can lay out all their projects so that they can fit within their department budgets. And then based on what this tells you, you can adjust the budget form to account for, oh, we need to add another year because we're going to actually build this not in 28, we're going to build it in calendar year 29. So that differential between funding approval to funding a construction start is now going from 2 years to 3 years, which is going to add 5%, which will adjust your budget and the amount based on that. So, but yes, adding things like that. This is, like I said, this is simple,
Basic.
critical path Gantt chart is the theory I used on building this.
That's very helpful.
Once again, I actually went through this with the municipality and showed them how to use it and how to put the data in, and then showed them how to use that against the budget form. And they got answers they weren't expecting,
Mhm.
but once they saw the logic and understood, they're like, this makes a lot of sense, and I understand where that this methodology was better than what they were initially proposing. And then they also took this data and compared it to what they originally had proposed or were going to present to basically have a check to see if they were right in their assumptions when they were building their project budget and assumed schedule. So this isn't, like I said, this isn't the answer, it's just an answer to start a discussion. Because if you build your own schedule and your own budget and you have nothing to check it against, how do you know if it's right or wrong? You really don't. And so you can use this to kind of validate other methods that you use to calculate budget and schedules.
So since this is our first year using these tools,
Yes.
if folks need some assistance kind of working with them and updating them, are you able to
I can help,
out?
and I can help.
Great.
I can go through it with Philman
Mm-hmm.
and kind of train the trainer
Yep.
with him so that he can answer questions too.
Yes, that would
if
be good too.
necessary. It's not, once you understand how the form uses the information and how to put the data in the correct format,
Mhm.
it's very simple. And I think Philman has seen that. Once I explained it, the logic and everything, I think I've shown him once or twice, or not once or twice, one or two things in there that once I explained it to him, I think it like clicked, like, oh, that makes sense now.
Okay.
So yes, I can help Philman, or anyone can call me and I can walk through it. Every project's unique. So if you call me and ask, I've got this project, I'm gonna ask you a lot of questions and a lot of things that should have been considered or should be considered, because that data needs to go in here because it's a critical piece of data that's gonna either affect the budget or the schedule significantly. So, all right, that's all I got.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo a couple of last things you said, just stressing that we recognize that every project is unique, and that this definitely isn't an end-all be-all. It's meant to start a conversation. And so if you believe that for your project, you need to adjust any of the formulas and whatnot, just let us know and we can work with you.
Yeah, right-of-way costs, that was one thing.
It's a monster.
Yeah, and y'all probably know your right-of-way costs the best in your jurisdiction. It might be a little different from what's in the template, but we'll work through it.
Yeah, I tried to build a document that PMO could use across the state as just a simple document. I could have built for all the what ifs, but then it would just be
Yeah,
unusable.
I think this is it's gonna help us out a lot. So
It's a
thank
good
you.
starting point.
Mhm.
It's better than what I've seen previously used in the past, which was not much. So,
And Raymond's been doing this a long time, so he has seen the schedules where they're just unrealistic. So
yeah,
this is a really good tool.
like I said, I boiled this down to be as simple as it can be so that you don't have to be an engineer who does project scheduling as your career to understand how to use this form. I tried to take all of that out of it and just make it, in this example here, 5 simple pieces of data you need to put in there, and it should get you really close.
Thank you. Any other questions online or in the room? All right. Seeing none, thank you very much.
So on the agenda, the last two items have kind of been combined into one, just an overall overview of federal aid project delivery. And also there's some slides on how to navigate the new Fiori system in there as well. And Sheila will be hitting this. Yes. Let's see.
Get a presentation. ready. To the right forward this time? I don't know.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm Sheila Atwood, and I've got Raymond Hayes here. He's my sidekick here on the presentation. So we're going to go over several things here. We're going to look at the STIP. We're going to look at funding and schedules, federal highways, what their role is and their guidelines. I've got some resources to show you, our website, how to request for an agreement, and then we're going to look at some project delivery. And then last, we'll look at our EBS, which is now called our Fiori EBS portal. Okay. All right, so the TIP process. If you have an amendment to the TIP, this will usually require the executive board or your TPO to take action. This process can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months. So there's some examples here of amendments, which would be if you were going to add or delete a project, or if you have a change or in your design or scope, such as your termini, or if you're adding number of lanes to a project. If you add or modify a phase of work, if you have a change in the cost, or if your TPO gives you additional funding for the project, you'll have to do an amendment. And also if you have a change in your schedule, meaning if you're moving from a phase of work from one fiscal year to another. Some modifications that are required. So the modification doesn't take as long as the amendments can take. So the modifications to the STIP, this means you usually do not have to take it to your board. So some examples of a modification would be a minor change in your funding amount. If you change your funding source, like if you have, I don't know, BGDA and you're just changing it to the TADA, that's usually just kind of behind the scenes, like a modification. We don't have to do an amendment that would take 2 or 4 months. And then small changes in your scope. I guess like if you're just
like if you're doing a sidewalk project and you're like, oh, we're coming up to an intersection and we're stopping on one leg of the intersection, and you realize during design you need to go across the street to update a curb ramp across the street. Well, you're outside your project limit at that point. And so that's where a small modification be like, hey, we literally need to cross the street to change this. Is that okay? And I'll tell you to go talk to your planning organization to make sure they're okay with that. Make sure it doesn't affect your CE document or anything. But like your project limit, as you have proposed it, when you're selling it to Triangle West, is that limit. There is no scope creep when it comes to design or project limits. The footprint is the footprint, and that is it. You don't get any more, and you're expected to build that, not anything less. So that would be a small change to accommodate a reasonable improvement for pedestrian accommodations and so forth like that.
Okay, some of the STIP changes. So if you have changes in the STIP, these revisions, that will require the Board of Transportation action. These changes, now this also can take a long time. It can take 2 to 3 months. Some examples of that is changing your fiscal year in which your money is to be authorized, or if you add or modify your phase of work. Some cases that do not require the board action are minor change in the funding amount. Sometimes that would be just where it's not equaling, like our agreement. I try to, it's going to equal the 80-20, where sometimes the STIP is rounded or something like that. So that might be just a minor thing. Or again, used a different source of funds. If LAP funds are involved, the TPO must review and concur. Okay, STIP schedules and funding. So when you're requesting your project, please make sure you have a realistic schedule. So this is what Raymond was just showing you, the example of the spreadsheet. That is a great tool to start with. So also just think about if you have all 4 phases, they should not be programmed in the same federal fiscal year. If you have to update your schedule, this could delay your project waiting on the STIP and then your funding authorizations. So you'll have to consider that, and that's the good thing about the worksheet as well, is if you go ahead and do that, then your funding authorizations, you should be able to, they should be good on schedules.
And the thing is to make sure that now when a funding authorization request goes in, the MPO schedule and the STIP must match. So if they don't match, your funding request will be stopped. And then it's literally going to take 4 months for you, because the MPO needs to make that adjustment in their schedule for your project. And then the STIP modification needs to process through. So we have had projects previously that were ready to ask for funding that they thought was going to make it in September, and it went to October, and their project just got delayed almost 6 months because of that. They guessed wrong.
Yeah, it's very time consuming. Another thing on your schedule, consider your scope and your location. So like for an example, your scope is, I don't know, a sidewalk in front of the school. Well, at that time, you need to think about scheduling your project, because are you going to need to do the construction when school is out? Not while they're in school. I don't know. So something like that with your scope, you need to consider your schedule. Ask for assistance. Raymond's always available. Ask for it.
Sure. For Division 5.
Yeah, he can definitely help with your schedule. Okay, what makes a good project? So 3 things to consider that makes a good project are your schedule, your scope, and your budget. So your schedule, I know we keep mentioning that the schedule is very important, and it is, because it can delay your project significantly. Consider the location. It takes time. It can take 3 to 4 months sometimes, like Raymond was saying earlier, to prepare your agreement and to get it signed by both parties, because we go to our board. Y'all usually take it to your board. So that can take several months, especially sometimes, we have to have our board items turned in really early for the month before. So if I miss that one deadline, it's like a whole month that you have to wait for us to sign the agreement. Another thing about your schedule is hiring the professional engineering firm to start design. It seems like it would be a simple process, but it's not. I mean, I've seen projects that it takes 6 to 8 months, by the time you advertise, interview, select your firm. It takes a long time.
go to their council for approval of the contract eventually?
Yes.
Mhm.
It's a very long process.
Yeah.
Another thing is when you're considering the location, be prepared for the parcels that you've got to acquire. Any utility poles that are going to need to be relocated. We say a rule of thumb to allow at least a year for each phase when you're scheduling your project. All right, another thing that makes a good project is your scope. Make sure the STIP reflects your location correctly. Don't overcommit on your scope, meaning the length of your project. Sometimes it's better to do a little at a time than, 5 or 6 miles of sidewalk.
So a good scope example was this municipality says, we're going to build sidewalk beside the road. I'm like, okay, great. And I started talking to them about it and I went to look at Street View and I'm like, okay, you're on a shoulder roadway with a ditch and a 10-foot tall back slope on your ditch. So you've got two choices. You're either going to go behind the ditch through private property and buy a right of way to build your sidewalk, which they didn't account for right of way costs. They were assuming to build the sidewalk beside the edge of roadway. And I'm like, well, to do that, you've got to go install curb and gutter and storm drain system, which is going to probably triple your project costs. So their concept was a simple sidewalk project along a roadway. Their scope missed completely the entire requirements of the project. And in discussion with them, when I went through all of that with them, they're like, we are not prepared for this project. We're giving the money back and walking away. And the best thing they did was not do the project instead of trying to make it. Because their plan, they didn't even have the project in their budget. And I'm like, you got to pay for it first to get reimbursed. And they're like, oh, we didn't understand that part either. So it wasn't even in their budget. So I'm like, you're definitely not ready for this project yet. So, but they understand your scope and what your intent is for the project, and then what the location requirements are to meet that intent, because those can become very costly decisions when it comes to actually meeting DOT requirements for what that project needs.
And let's see, the last thing that makes a good project is your budget. Always be prepared for the unexpected. You may have overhead cost, and use Raymond's worksheet again. Break down each phase for the cost, so you can get an idea of what each phase will cost you at the end. And also remember that the DOT can charge to your project.
In Division 5, we will charge to your project. That is a definite.
All right, so here is an example of a project that's in the STIP. So I just kind of took a screenshot here and I've got things highlighted. So let's look at this to kind of go over to see what actually is correct in here and looks good and what does not. So when you submit your project to me on your application, the first thing I do is I pull up the STIP and I compare your application to the STIP. And looking at this one, first of all, I read the scope and the description on here and compare it. And so like this one says, let's see. I'm trying to see if I can read the scope here.
It just says intersection of this and that street.
Yes.
Doesn't really say anything else.
Intersection, yeah. And then at US 311, something I can't see. All right, and then the route says Sullivan Town Road. Okay. So, you know, I'm not familiar. I have to look at the division. I have to go to my Google Maps because I don't live near this area. So it's like, okay, Sullivan Town Road. I have no idea where that is. By looking at the intersection, I have no idea. So I don't even know what town this project's in. It doesn't tell me at all. So to me, this is not a good scope.
Yeah, the worst are when they say Main Street, because believe it or not, there's more than one Main Street in the state of North Carolina. So that does make it challenging to look up Main Street in North Carolina.
Yes, so make sure when you do apply for your project, you know, and you don't, and I know it's, you know, you're not really thinking about that. You're applying your project, you know, is in Chapel Hill. So you're assuming when you're applying for it that it's in Chapel Hill. Well, like I said, if someone just pulls up the STIP and reads this, we don't know where it is. Okay, the next thing let's look at is the activity. So this is good. We've got all 4 phases in the STIP. You know, years ago, now right-of-way used to cover right-of-way and utilities. So now utilities is its own phase. And I say, just for a rule of thumb, when you're applying for these projects, request all 4 phases. And the reason why I say that is because if you are in design and your firm is like, oh, wow, there's a whole lot more utilities than we thought was going to be out there to be. So now we're wishing we had the utility phase in the STIP to help with reimbursement. So if you don't have it in there, here again, this is a STIP amendment. So it's going to take another 4 months again to get that added into the STIP. So I say, put it all in there. That does not mean you've got to, you know, that you're going to get reimbursed for that thing. You do not have to request it. Just put, you know, $5,000, $10,000 on that phase just to hold it there. Okay, and then the other example on this one, you can see that engineering was scheduled for the previous years, which is probably 25. And then right-of-way and utilities, they usually will go hand in hand. So they're in 26 and then construction in 27. So to me, that is good. When it first got submitted, they're not all in the same year. So this is a more realistic schedule.
Unless your right of way is for like 50 parcels,
Yeah,
you're not going to get through 50 parcels in one calendar year
right.
without dedicating a tremendous amount of staff to do that.
Right.
And that's where the scope is really key in making sure you identify all the parcels and the amount of impact your project's going to have on each parcel. We've had a couple of projects that were full takes just because that's how they ended up being. And that is not a quick process by any means. So, you know, those were significant road projects. But we have had probably less than a half dozen full takes that I'm aware of in the last 8 years, but they happen. It can happen, especially in some of these older residential areas where some sidewalk is almost on their front doorstep practically. So just think about that kind of stuff.
Okay, let's look at federal highways role. So federal highways, they are the ones that provide the federal funding for your project. They ensure that the federal dollars are spent appropriately. They ensure that there is no fraud, waste, and/or abuse. Federal highways ensures the recipients have a good project, and they want to see the improvements and enhancements for the LGAs. So they are not against us. They are here to help, and they just want to make sure that the project you're applying for meet all the standards for receiving federal funds. Here are a few important guidelines for federal highways. So remember, once your funding is authorized for a phase of work, that starts the clock for federal highways. So this notifies federal highways that you are starting your work. For federal highways to know you're continuing work on the project, you must submit a claim at least every 6 months. This helps them to know that there's activity progressing on your project. And if you don't send an invoice at least every 6 months, then Tammy Richards, she works in our office, and she receives a report from Federal Highways. And if you are not submitting your invoices, you're on her list, which will show you as an inactive. So you may receive an email or a call from Tammy, and she may just ask, the status. We understand that sometimes they haven't billed you, the contractor, so you haven't billed us. So we do understand sometimes, and you just more or less just let Tammy know the reason, so she can document that. Another guideline is the period of performance. So NCDOT, we allow up to 5 years. That's what we usually put in our agreements. If you have more than one phase of work, then we say you have 5 years to complete your project. So when we say completing your project, this doesn't mean just complete construction. This means you complete your construction, you have acceptance of the project, you submit your final invoice and your package to the department for final review.
And DOT final fiscal closeout.
Fiscal closeout. Okay. So now I've got a few slides here that show some resources. So this website, this is the LPMO website. You can go on here. This is for internal and external customers. And you can go to the search box up there, and you can, or whenever you can, when you go to this, you can search for just Connect NCDOT, and you should get to this website. And then for local governments, we have a tab for local governments and then local projects. So here is another screenshot. When you click on local projects, you will see a tab that says local projects delivery resources. If you click on that, then you will see this screen. This is kind of half of the screen. We have a lot of templates already on here for you to use. So always check our website before you just, if you need to create something, just say, oh, maybe they have an example. So if you're doing your RFLOI, we do have a new reimbursement tracking worksheet. I'm telling the LGAs, if it's a new project, I want you to start using the reimbursement tracking worksheet. I know that the ones that are older, we'll just continue as is. But for the new projects, I want you to start using that tracking sheet. We have, if you need access to EBS, we have our security form on here. Lots of templates. And also in the middle of the screen here, you will see all of our webinars. So for 2025, we had a webinar every month. And this is the video recording or the PowerPoint presentation. So you can go back and look at any of these. And then we'll also be doing this in 2026. Okay, now we're going to talk about the municipal agreement between the LGA and DOT. All right, when to request for an agreement. So when your project has a STIP number and is programmed in the STIP, then you can request your agreement. When you attain this STIP number, the eligible phases will be programmed in the STIP or in the, what's it, TIP and the STIP. Both of them, right? Is it the TIP and the STIP? Or the, whatever your TPO has. It's called TIP.
Whatever y'all call it.
Whatever you call it.
We call that, yeah.
The TIP?
Yeah.
The tip.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, your request, you will need to make sure you've got certain information to complete your application. So you'll have to have your contact information on who you want the agreement to be sent to for DocuSign. You'll need to make sure that you have your project scope, and all your funding source and your dollar amounts and your schedule. That will need to be included on your application. And you will enter the request for the agreement through our EBS Fiori, which will be, it's called the application to start your agreement. Okay, some facts about an agreement: cannot be initiated until funding is programmed in the STIP in the correct year. The agreement is a contract that is executed between NCDOT and the local government agency. The agreement includes provisions that the LGA must comply with in order to receive reimbursement. The agreement includes your scope of work, your funding, your time frame, and your responsibilities. And please read your agreement. I know, sometimes you just get it gets signed, it gets filed. I know it's 20-some pages, but it actually just lays out step by step on what you need to do. So please read your agreement. And very important, the funding authorizations cannot occur until you have a fully executed agreement. And this is just a screenshot of the agreement. Okay, now we're going to talk about local project delivery. All right, I know a lot of you have seen this slide over and over, but this to me is one of our best slides. It kind of gives a very high level overview of the steps for your project. I actually have this still hanging up in my office forever. So this hits the major milestones of a standard construction project. All right, so the red are the funding authorizations. So you will notice we have 4 phases: the PE, the right-of-way, utility, and construction. So in order to receive reimbursements for the funding activities, so what's below the authorization, you must, okay. So like for PE, to get PE, you have to have your agreement. So anything above what is the red is what you have to have prior to the funding authorization. So like for the next one, the right-of-way authorization, before you can request right-of-way authorization, you have to have your agreement, your environmental document, and your right-of-way plans. So what's in bold? So what's in italics, that is what activity you do during that phase. All right, funding authorization. For every phase that is eligible for reimbursement, the LGA must request funding authorization through our EBS system. Okay, any work that is done prior to funding authorization is not reimbursable. So listed here, you'll see what services can be reimbursed for each phase. So for like PE, pays for your professional engineering services and other pre-construction activities. The right-of-way funding pays for your cost of acquiring right-of-way, your appraisals, and other right-of-way costs. Utility pays for relocating your utilities. And now sometimes utilities, so I call them either, some people call them above ground or underground, some people call them dry or wet utilities. So usually like the dry utilities, like your poles, your AT&T, your Spectrum, all of that is usually what's in the utility phase. Now, sometimes there are utilities during the construction phase.
So that question comes up a lot about, well, we're not getting utility reimbursement as a reimbursable phase. Understand that utility funding is for utilities being relocated prior to construction. And that is something you'll need to figure out as part of your scope in your project. There has been 3 projects in 8 years that relocated utilities prior to construction. Most of the time it happens during construction. If utility relocation happens during construction, it's a construction eligible expense that is occurring due to the construction of the project during the construction phase. And therefore, utility relocations that occur during construction are reimbursement eligible under the construction phase. The utility phase is only prior to construction starting. We had a project that relocated a power line ahead of time because they were able to do it. There was space to do it. Another municipality relocated a water line ahead of time because they had the space and the materials to do it. Those are 2 of the 3 situations that have occurred on 2 current projects. Most of the time it happens during construction. So just understand that you can get reimbursement for project-related impacts to utility facilities that require relocation due to the project impact. This does not mean that you can get your 6-inch water line upgraded to an 8-inch water line. That is a betterment. Those are not paid for by federal funding. So just keep that in mind, that it has to be a project-related impact created by the project, necessary to occur for the project to exist. If the question can be asked, if I don't relocate this utility or do this utility work, can this project still be built? And if the answer is yes, I can still build it without relocating that utility, then it's not an eligible reimbursement. And other would be like railroad issues. And the best thing you can do is don't do anything across the railroad. That is the best solution to your problem. Just
Might not always be feasible, but.
don't involve the railroad.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
I've got a half a dozen or more projects I can refer you to, and they will tell you that involving the railroad was the worst idea they ever had.
We have a few of them.
Durham's got the most because of all the sidewalk they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so funding authorization. Here again, just refer back to that chart that we just went over. Let's see, when you have submitted all the required deliverables, then the system will send you an email that notifies you to submit a change request and ask for funding. So for example, when you have your approved CE document and your right-of-way plans, and it's an EBS, then either Raymond or myself, we check a box and it will send you an email that says that you can request for the next phase of funding. And here again, remember, funding authorization starts the clock for federal highways. Okay, NCDOT will use your funding. So DOT reserves some of your funding to use towards their review and oversight work. If you're only getting reimbursed for construction, the department still will use your funding for cost related. So what we'll usually do is we'll set up some design, some PE funding for Raymond to charge to, like if he's reviewing your plans, I don't know, your environmental document, anything like that, he can charge to your project.
And there is, DOT does apply a system charge just for the privilege of using federal funds. So, but if you use your budget estimate form correctly, that is accounted for and should be in your funding when you request it.
So that's included in the budget estimate form.
Correct.
Okay.
Because it is a
Good. That was gonna
project,
be one of my questions.
it is a project eligible expense,
Mhm.
as long as you have funding available to apply to it.
So at closeout, the division project manager, they will determine what the DO charges are. We have like a worksheet thing that fills that out. You will use any available federal funds on the project to cover 80% of those charges and bill the LGA for the non-federal match. If there's no available federal funding, for example, if we have reimbursed all the federal funds to the LGA, then the LGA will be responsible for 100% of that cost. Okay, professional engineering. So once we get the agreement and we have, and you are getting reimbursed for PE, then we request for funding, PE funding authorization as soon as you get your agreement executed. Let's see, so that is the very next step. Okay, professional services. There's 3 ways you can procure professional services. First, you can follow the procurement procedures to advertise for a project-specific contract. Secondly, you can follow procurement procedures for an on-call contract, which a lot of you have on-call contracts. If you know you're getting awarded 3 or 4 projects that are all sidewalk projects, then it's usually best to go ahead and do an on-call contract and have several firms so you can just select from your list, and it saves a lot of time than having to, do an RFLOI for each sidewalk project. And if you do have someone in-house.
And also to, if you have an on-call just in general for your municipality itself, then you can utilize that. It'll just need the process for selection, advertising and selection of those firms will need to be reviewed by LPMO to make sure they're federal aid compliant. So we have several municipalities that just have a continuous on-call that they just continuously update and renew every 5 years. And some projects will do what we call like a specialized on-call, or maybe just lap projects. Like we've done it with CEI, municipality had 5 projects. They just did an on-call for 5 lap projects at one time, and it's only tied to those projects. So there's ways to not have to do this multiple times over for simplicity.
Efficiency.
Yes.
Okay, initiating the PE phase. So after the agreement is executed and your project's eligible to receive PE funding, you will follow these steps. So first of all, you will request to advertise an RFLOI for a specific project or for your own call. And please remember, we have a template on our website for you to use. It's basically just a fill in the blank. So once you have that completed, you'll submit that in EBS. It'll go to Raymond first, or if you're in Division 7, it will go to Alex and Renee. And they will review it. And I usually have the division to help me look at the work codes, usually, especially if it's a different project for design. So if you need, special work codes for that, that's what they help me with. So then once you have your draft, we review that, we'll approve that in EBS, and then you can advertise. And we can also have that put on DOT's website. So then once it's closed, then you will interview and you'll score and you'll make your selection. If this project selected, then you'll just interview, score, and select. If it's an on-call, then I keep an Excel spreadsheet of who you select for your on-call with all the work codes, and keep a running record of which project and which firm you select for that certain project.
We have a question online
Okay.
from Tina.
Okay.
If using on-call or in-house design, do you need to provide an estimate or proposal to NCDOT as an audit prior to getting underway to allow for reimbursement?
Okay, yes, she's saying, so once you have your firm selected, then that firm is going to complete that. So they call it the kitchen sink worksheet. It's on our website where it lists all your costs, your man-day estimates. So yes, you'll fill that out, and we have to have that reviewed and approved. And then you'll sign a contract, and we have to review it before you can be reimbursed. Is that what she's asking?
Yeah, I believe so. Tina, feel free to chime in if you need.
We don't, Division 5 doesn't have anybody that utilizes in-house staff. Well, they do utilize in-house staff, but they don't ask for reimbursement. Another division has, I think 10, has utilized municipal staff and got reimbursed for it, but that was a lot of effort to get that reviewed and accepted price-wise. Because one, you're not competitive bidding it, which is one of the federal aid requirements for professional services. So it's more of a headache than it is a convenience.
Right.
I think you might have answered my question. That was where I was going. If you were choosing, say you had a town engineer or an on-call engineer, so it wouldn't be a competitive advertisement, could you still, under this approach, submit kind of the audit as part of a proposal and then use them for reimbursement? But it sounds like maybe, but maybe not. So that would be something to kind of check into before pursuing.
Well, an on-call is a competitive bid or a competitive advertisement. You're just selecting more than one, or presumptively more than one. You're selecting at least one, presumptively more. But an on-call is still competitive, not competitive, sorry. It is still publicly advertised. It's when it becomes internal staff only that it really makes it challenging for meeting the public advertisement requirement for federal funds.
Okay, thank you.
But we have, like I said, like Apex will do their own internal design for certain projects. They just don't ask for PE reimbursement for their work effort.
Okay.
So once you've submitted your cost, and then we'll review it, the division will look at it. And then after I look at it, I send it to our OIG office and they review it. And I will say what I have seen lately come back from OIG is the firms are not updating the CRS system. So whatever is in the CRS system for what their employees' salary, it needs to match what's on the worksheet and what's in CRS. If it doesn't match CRS, then it gets kicked back for you to go back to the firm. They've got to update CRS and then resubmit it.
And that's created when you get like maybe end of year pay adjustments and they submitted their application, their fee in November, and got pay adjustments done in December and OIG reviews it in January, they're not going to match. Or when it comes to whenever your engineering firm gets notification of their audited overhead rates. I know my company gets ours in May, I believe. My previous company got theirs in April.
Mhm.
It's something that happens throughout the year. It doesn't happen at this point in time every year for everybody. And so they may get caught in a transition where the overhead rates may adjust based on their previous approved audit. And it just happens, and you fix it and you move on.
So once we have the approved rates, then you will do a contract between the LGA and the firm. And you will submit that in EBS as well for review and final approval. And then once we have the signed contract, then that is when you can submit for reimbursements. Okay, professional services must. All professional services procurement must be in accordance with 23 CFR 172. If you're bored, read it. Lots of good information. LGA must have their own written procedures, or they can comply with DOT's policies and procedures for procurement and administration of major professional and specialized services contracts. Okay, rule of thumb. If DOT is paying for it, we want to know about it up front. So DOT must review proposed costs before the LGA incurs them. All procurement must be competitive. No advertisement prior to funding authorization. However, I do kind of let that slide. I will say, just to help for time, I'll do them in, concurrently. So like if you have submitted your funding request in EBS and I've made the funding request, I will let you go ahead, create your RFLOI, go ahead and advertise, but I will not let you go any further than that until we get the funding authorization. So then as soon as we get the funding authorization, hopefully I get the funding authorization about the same time your RFLOI has been advertised and everything. So then you can, make your selection and do your kitchen sink worksheet for your cost. So usually, like I said, just to help save some time, we'll do that ahead of time. Okay. So the environmental document. So during the PE phase, you are required to have a CE document. All right, environmental document. I'm probably going to let Raymond speak here. It must be in conformance with the NEPA Policy Act. You must comply with other federal environmental laws. And most of our projects, you will complete the CE document.
Yeah, if for some reason during the project you find out that your project is elevated above a CE, and that's a type 3, if it goes above a type 3 into an EA, it's probably the wrong project to be running through the LAP program, because once you get into EA and EIS documents, your environmental timeline is years now instead of weeks to months. And a CE is a type 3 CE is a pretty significant CE. I think I've only had maybe a dozen or so, if even that many. Those are pretty significant CEs that are very involved and very time consuming and very expensive. So.
Now I will say I have seen some of these, when you're preparing your CE document, depending on your location, I guess there's certain species that are looked at certain times of the year,
Yeah.
something like if you've got bats or,
So make
I don't
sure,
know,
yeah, make
so-
sure make sure you're aware of what endangered species or threatened species are within your project limits and what times of year those investigations are permitted. Some vegetative threatened species are ones in the spring, ones in the fall. Bats are a certain time of year for roosting. So make sure you're aware of that and plan accordingly in your schedule to account for that, because it could take a year or more to do all of your species investigations to complete your CE document.
okay, and remember to authorize either right-of-way funds or construction funds. We must have a completed environmental document that is not more than 1 year old. If it's a year old, you'll have to go back and do just a CE consultation, which, you know, if nothing has changed, then that shouldn't take very long. All right, so now when you have your agreement, your signed CE document, and your right-of-way plans approved, then you can request for your right-of-way or your utility funding. That's if you're seeking reimbursement for those. Okay, so here are some high points for right-of-way. So any kind of right-of-way, whether it's acquisition in fee simple, or you're entering into an easement, temporary or permanent, or an encroachment, must be properly documented and then certified. All acquisition must be in conformance with the Uniform Act, whether right-of-way acquisition is being reimbursed with federal funds or not. So even though you're not getting reimbursed for right-of-way, you still have to follow the Uniform Act. Appraisals must be reviewed by DOT, even if right-of-way is not an eligible expense. NCDOT will provide a concurrence and just compensation.
And appraisals are done even if the land is being donated, because the property owner still needs to be made aware of the financial right they're giving up by donating that land. And another big issue that comes up with right-of-way is placement of trail facility, mostly trails here lately, on municipal-owned property. Still requires a protected, recorded corridor, even on that property, because that property could get sold in the future, and that corridor must be protected and recorded. We've had that come up with RTF, with a trail on their property, and Town of Cary put a trail through their park. And we're like, you got to put it in a protected corridor. They're like, well, it's our park. I'm like, well, you could sell the park tomorrow. So it's just, that's been a challenge here lately about municipalities think, oh, it's our property. We can just put a trail out there and we're good to go. We don't have to do anything. You still have to record the corridor. You still have to get a right-of-way certification, even if there is zero impact. Because you have to prove there's no impact as part of the certification process.
Okay, if right-of-way is an eligible phase, right-of-way funding must be authorized prior to acquiring right-of-way.
Prior to negotiation of property owner. It's prior to negotiation. Can't talk about the money until you got the money. That's the simple way to remember it.
All right, right-of-way appraisals. There's 3 options: narrative, right-of-way transmittal, summary, waiver evaluations. Performed by DOT approved appraisers. Appraisals must be reviewed, and limited pool of appraisers. So there's not many appraisers out there, so also take that into account of your schedule. You can submit something and it may take a very long time.
And we highly recommend, if you're a municipality assuming you're going to do right-of-way with your own right-of-way staff, you need to assume you're going to use contract staff to do that work. Because every time it turns out that they're ready to do right of way with their own staff says we're too busy or their staff doesn't exist anymore. So we highly recommend when you set up your design contract, put right of way services in your design contract as a supplemental option. You can exercise it if you need it, and if you don't, you don't. But when you need it and don't have it, you just added 6 months to your project waiting for it.
At best.
Yeah.
6 months at best.
Best. So far, no internal staff has done right-of-way work for any projects that I'm aware of. They have turned, when it got to that point in time, either their right-of-way department didn't exist anymore because everybody left, or they were way too busy to do the job. And then they're sitting around stuck like, well, do we wait 10 months for them to get unbusy? Or do we move forward with our own contract that we're not prepared for now?
Mhm.
So,
To get off track just a little bit, speaking of that, I went to a right-of-way conference and they were talking about all the right-of-way appraisers. The average age is 60 and above.
Oh dear.
And they're like, so if you have someone that they do not know what they want to do in their life, tell them to go into right-of-way because
It's a growing field.
they need right-of-way agents and appraisers very bad.
That's good to know.
Yeah, sorry that happened. All right, utility relocation. Remember, if you're seeking reimbursement for utility work, this is now a new phase in the STIP, so it must be authorized. So all utilities should be cleared from the project area prior to moving into construction, unless utility relocation is a part of the construction contract. Costs for the third party utility providers to relocate utilities must be reviewed by DOT before LGA enters into a contract. And be aware of the length of time for utility relocation and potential cost. Okay, right-of-way, utility, and railroad certifications. This is just briefly what Raymond said a while ago. Even though you're not getting, if there's not any right-of-way to acquire or no utilities or railroad, you still have to have the form, to be completed and filled out, just even simple as checking no. All right, so you must have right-of-way, utility, and the railroad certifications before you can move to the construction phase. The certification ensures that LGA has control of all right-of-way needed for the project, and the right-of-way is clear from all obstructions. So either the LGA owns outright or has a lease or easement or other documents to control right-of-way. Your certification should also address any utility or railroad conflicts. Utilities should be relocated out of the project area. Utility relocation should be included in the construction contract. And any railroad conflicts must be documented with agreements approval from railroad to encroach on their property.
So just for that last bullet, to put a number that equals some amount of time that I've seen utilized, that would be anywhere from 1 to 3 years to get that sorted. So you need to think really hard about how bad you want a project if you're going to cross the railroad. Because it could take multiple years to get it sorted. And I have seen that happen where the railroad literally just disappeared for 2 years, no contact at all to the municipality, even after multiple attempts to contact. So it can be a huge time add to a project to deal with the railroad. And Durham has got numerous examples they can tell you about too.
Okay, so this is your last step prior to requesting construction funding, which is to prepare your contract proposal and your final plans and estimate. Okay, contract proposal and estimate. So make sure your contract proposal is prepared in accordance with the 24 standard specifications. If they are not, they'll be returned to be updated. The proposal will include your federal provisions, which is part of the contract. The engineer's estimate is a line item estimate that references the spec book or special provisions. The engineer's estimate is also used to set a goal for your DBE program. Local projects are still,
No goal.
I saw something, local projects are still,
We're still documenting DBEIS payments, but we're not setting a goal.
all right, so Raymond said we are not setting a goal, but we are still reporting, the DBEIS form.
And do keep in mind that the DOT standard specifications are updated every 6 years. So that's been a challenge for some projects that have started when 2018 specs just rolled out, and those projects transitioned to 24 specs. That's how long some of these have been going on. So if you've got a project that's getting close to 2030, you could be anticipating a spec change come 2030. So plan accordingly.
Okay, construction funding. Once you have a CE document that's less than a year old, your right-of-way plans, you've acquired right-of-way, you've relocated above-ground utilities, you got right-of-way, utility, and railroad certifications, your final plans, your contract proposal and estimate package, then we are ready to request for construction authorization. All right, construction procurement. Advertising and letting a construction contract can only occur after construction funds are authorized. DOT must review and concur in the LGA's proposal to award a construction contract. Remember, go to our website. We have our template letters and forms that you can use for requesting concurrence. Once DOT has concurred, the LGA will execute the bid proposal, which becomes the construction contract. Do you have anything to add?
Nope.
All right, construction. Contract administration and CEI is accomplished by the LGA in accordance with the DOT construction manual. LGA should hire a professional engineering firm to provide these services. And you hire the CEI firm, just like we did, like we went over in the professional services. You have to advertise either project specific or if you have an on-call. DOT will provide oversight through the division office or the resident engineer's office. DOT must concur with the LGA's acceptance of the project before final reimbursement can be made. Okay, let construction contract. Now you are ready for you've done that. Now it's time working on the project, reimbursement. All right. So reimbursement, this can occur throughout the project as costs are incurred. We rather for you to submit invoices, not wait to the very last and have 100 documents attached to your reimbursement for Raymond to go through. LGA, you will pay the full invoice. Then you will send to DOT, which per your agreement is the amount we will reimburse you, which is usually the 80%. Final reimbursement will not occur until the project is complete, accepted by DOT, and all reporting and other requirements have been accomplished. Closeout and final voucher date. So the department will process several items related to closing out your project. Ensure that the LGA has appropriate records. Calculating any costs that the LGA owes the department. Certifying materials permanently incorporated in the project. So once these items are accomplished, DOT will request Federal Highway to close the project and issue a final voucher date. All right, well, let me go back. So once we give you the final voucher date, remember you have to keep your records
3 years
3 years after that date.
from that date.
From that date, you can be audited for your project. So please make sure that you keep your records. Okay, so before we go in briefly to the EBS, I guess if you want to see if there's any questions on that.
Yeah.
Part.
Questions online or in the room before we launch into the EBS Fiori portal? All right, very thorough.
All right. I hope y'all are awake. Okay, so I'm going to briefly just go over the EBS. I'm not going to like show a lot of screens and all of that, because our office, we're actually going to be working on getting new documents on how to like request for the agreement, how to do change requests, reimbursements. We're working on guidance through all of that. So once we have that, it'll be posted on our website. So as you get new employees in the LGA, everything will be listed on our website, hopefully soon. So, okay, so the EBS portal, this is our tool that we use for local projects. So this is where you request your new agreements, your supplemental agreements, any documents that you need to be reviewed by the department. You will attach these through the EBS portal. You will request your funding authorizations for each phase of work. You will submit those by submitting change request. And you will submit reimbursement request for work performed. So think of, I love this picture. I believe my co-worker Leah found this picture somewhere. And so it's kind of like a filing cabinet within the computer, within our EBS is how we look at it. So. All right, the security form. We have updated our security form because now EBS has switched over to Fiori, which now requires you to have a NCID. So you have to have an NCID before you can have access to EBS. So to get that, you go through your LGA office to obtain an NCID to request before you can fill out the form. So this form is on our website. And if you already have access to EBS, like for Powellville or Governor Highway Safety or another program within DOT, we will just add the LPMO to your current access, but you still have to fill out this form. So that's basically that. Okay, so looking at different roles in EBS, so everyone sees a different screen when we're in EBS. My home screen and my screen looks different than Raymond's screen. My form screen looks different than the LGA's. So when you're calling, if you have a problem and you email me and say it's not letting me do this, always take a screenshot of your error message when you send me an email, just so I know which screen you are on, because my screen does not look like your screen.
And we can't see your version of the system either, so
Right.
it's challenging.
Yes, it is. So when we're acting like we don't know what you're talking about, it's because we don't. We don't know what kind of error message you're getting. Okay, so in the system, the roles for the LGA, you will request your agreement by completing your application. You can submit your documents. You will request for funding authorizations, and you will submit reimbursement request. Okay, the role for myself, LPMO, we will get your application once you submit it. It comes to me first, so we'll review it in our office, and then it goes to the division for them to review. We will coordinate your professional services contract, all of that. We'll do that through EBS. You will submit activities for that. Process reimbursements. Now, if it's for PE and it's very simple reimbursement, then usually I will review those and approve those. Any other ones, if I have questions on those, I'll send them to the division. If you are requesting for funding authorizations, you'll submit a change request and they will come to LPMO. So I will request your funding. We will issue your notice to proceed. And any other documents that I have to coordinate with the division staff, I can do that as well. Okay, the division. So they can review and approve dates for delivery, that means on the application, when I forward it to them, they look at your schedule and make sure that it's reasonable. If not, they complete the application delivery dates. Anything that you need reviewed as an activity, when you create and submit those, they go straight to the division office. And some of those I don't even see a lot of those, because you're coordinate with the division with those activities. The division, they will oversee all the construction activities and the closeout activities. They will assist in processing your right-of-way, utility, and construction reimbursements. And they will provide your notice to proceed. Okay. All right. Once you have completed and submitted your application, it comes to LPMO in our workflow. We will review the application and we check to make sure the project's been programmed in the STIP. We will review your scope and your funding and make sure your eligible phases are identified correctly. Then we will approve the application, which we will send to, once I approve it, it goes to the division. Then that's when they review it and put in the delivery dates. If we have any questions for, like for the dates or the funding or anything like that, we can return it to you and then you can correct it and return it back. As far as rejecting your application, if I'm going to reject it, I'll usually send you an email or call you on why I'm rejecting it. And the reason why I should reject it will only be if it's not programmed in the STIP. Because if it's not programmed in the STIP, then you cannot start your agreement process. Okay, so this is a screenshot of what the new EBS Fiori looks like now. So when you log in, now you have all these tiles that you can select on what you want to perform. You used to have to go in your agreement and complete your activities that way. Now you just select by the, either activity or either a reimbursement, change request, or application. You just select the tile on whatever action you're taking. All right, so when you go into the agreements, you should be able to, there's a little thing on the right side where you can set your filters and how you want to view your headers. Like if you want your TIP number on one side, you can set it, drag it, and then you can name it how you want it. So the next time you go into the agreements, you can click on it and that same view will pop up every time. Well, and this is the screen I was talking about where you can go over, I think, to the far right, and you can customize how you want to set up your view. And you can save it and name it. So for the reimbursements or the change request, when you are doing these, remember you can only submit one at a time. If you've got a claim out there waiting to be approved, you cannot submit a change request until the claim is approved, and vice versa. If you've got a change request out there, you can't submit a reimbursement claim until the change request is approved. And the reason for that is because both of those actions can change your funding amount on your final agreement, and it has to be updated in the EBS system before it doesn't want to do one while the funding hasn't been updated for the other one. Okay, activities. So this is where you would click on, and any activity you need to submit, like your CE document, your plans, any of that, you go through this tile. Now, we did notice that there were a lot of activities. When you click on this tile, it'll go to your inbox and it shows any action that needs to be taken. So, like if Raymond returned activities to you, I mean, you may have a lot on one project. So what we had IT do was anything that was older than a year, we had them move all of those activities to the archive tile. Well, I'm sorry, tab. So when you click on activities, you will have a current tab and a history tab. So the current tab means you can create and do anything that's listed there. If you click on the history tab, then you cannot. Those things are either completed or they are, we call them archived because they were so old. You will have to create a new one for that one if they were archived. So we're kind of still working on some of this with IT. So, all right, now this screen is a little different from the original agreement detail screen that we had before Fiori. So this kind of shows the high level information on your project. this is still kind of a working in progress as well. You can see like your agreement overview, your funding. You should be able to see how much your agreement says, how much is authorized, and any attachments. You should see those as well. So you don't have, if you go to this screen, you don't have to go to each tile to click on your attachments. You should be able to go to attachments here and see everything that you have attached to your project. Okay, new claim workbook. So I spoke of this a little earlier on our website. We have a new form. It's called Reimbursement Tracking Worksheet. So we've created this to kind of help. I had a couple projects that they submitted a reimbursement and we had already paid for it twice. So we had to go back and we had to take it out. And, you know, it was just a huge headache. So we've created this worksheet for you to try to keep up, you know, it'll list like your invoice number, the dates, the period from and to, and how much it is. So if you have new projects, please use this form. Like I said, the older projects, we'll just finish them as we're doing now. And you know, you have to create a cover sheet and attach to your reimbursements currently. So we're looking at trying to incorporate this reimbursement tracking worksheet into a cover letter, so you won't have to do a cover letter and the reimbursement worksheet. We're trying to make it a little more simpler. So that's to come. All right, and this was Raymond. He went over his worksheets earlier. Let's see, and I believe that is it. Yeah.
All right.
So here's our contact information. If you have any questions on the EBS, like I said, we are working on some training for that, and it'll be on our website. And please look for emails that go out. I don't know if they will, I think they go out now. It's the LPMO group email. If not, it comes out by Marta Matthews for our monthly webinar. And we've changed the time on this, and I think it's our the last Wednesday. It's either the third or last Wednesday of every month. So
It's the
just,
third Wednesday.
is it the third Wednesday?
It's last.
I think it's the third because of the holidays. We saw that
something
it was
weird with the
running.
last Wednesdays.
Yeah, it was running into November and December was difficult because of the holiday. So I think it is the third Wednesday of every month. So look for that email to watch our webinar. If you have any suggestions on what you want to hear, learn, please just send us an email. So maybe we can add that to one of our webinars. And I'll leave that. If you have anybody have any questions.
Thank you, Sheila.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any questions in the room or online? I'm not seeing anything online yet. Tina says, super helpful, thanks. Thank you, Tina. So most of our members are probably on that email list. If not, you know, we as TPO, we can make sure we send it out to our technical committee so that folks can tune into those webinars. They're very helpful.
We try, because, you know, we get so many new forms. We try to make sure that we're adding everybody to our email distribution. So,
okay.
So yeah, if y'all
they might get it more than once, but that's okay.
Yes.
Nikki is on that email list.
Do I know?
Does she have the TPOs and RPOs on the email list?
I think Philman's on it.
Yeah.
I think anyone
might
that's
be on
attended
it
a session in the past has been added to it as they go along.
I've seen Jennifer on there from CRTPO, so I think they are.
Yeah, I think they are.
Okay.
Great. Just a lot of thank yous that it's been very helpful. And I will echo that. So,
And one thing to add, there's a lot of changes coming to the PMO program. A lot of new documents, a lot of humongous guidebook, I guess,
Yes.
coming.
Yeah, we have we do have a handbook
That's coming in.
that's being worked on. So hopefully.
The closeout process has been written down finally. So there's a lot of great resources available. Sorry, there's a lot of great resources being developed. They may not all be presently available because they're not officially active yet, but we're using a lot of them as kind of piloting them on some stuff. But if anybody needs any assistance or anything, we've probably got something created now that can help. I know we've done a lot for closeout. That's helped get a lot of projects across the state closed, like dozens upon dozens of projects that were just sitting stagnant. So
that's great.
there's a lot of big changes happening and getting ready to happen. So.
So just one last reminder, all materials will be posted to our website, and I'll probably also email them out just so I can also include the application materials.
And this recording will be posted
Yeah.
on our website too. I know there were a couple questions about that because we had technical committee staff, but maybe not all the folks that would be putting together the applications or putting together the cost estimates. So very good.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Stay warm.
So when do you think you're gonna have project selection done?
Well, the deadline is January 30th. So we'll probably have selection done. What's our schedule say?